Why don't you go back to your box, Olivia? He said it loud, in front of everyone at the party. The music stopped for a second, and then the laughter came. Sharp, cruel, echoing off the walls. Even my old best friend chuckled like it was some kind of joke. I stood there, holding a slice of dry pizza, pretending it didn't sting, pretending I didn't just hear my name dragged through dirt. But I smiled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked out. And 3 weeks later, I walked back in with the deed. Because the house he mocked me in, I own it now. And he pays rent. To me, I used to believe in stability, schedules, little gold stars, and classroom hugs. But that belief shattered the day I lost my job. It was a Thursday afternoon when the principal called me in. Budget cuts, he said. Nothing personal. They always say that, don't they? Nothing personal right before they slice through the life you've built like it's paper. 2 weeks later, I was out of my apartment. Rent in Austin doesn't wait for severance. I packed everything I owned into the back of my old Honda Civic, drove to my aunt's place, and set up camp in her garage. She tried to make it feel like home, laid down a rug, gave me a standing fan, even put up a curtain to separate me from the washing machine. But it wasn't home. It was a holding cell. One I sat in with a fake smile while the world moved on without me. That's where I was when I got the message. An old friend, Katie, invited me to a party at a house near the university. She said it would be chill, just some friends, drinks, music. I almost didn't go. Something about showing up in thrift store jeans and shoes I'd re-glued twice didn't exactly scream party ready, but something in me, maybe pride, maybe hunger, said yes. So I showed up. It was a nice place, bigger than I expected. Brick porch, ivy-covered fence, warm light spilling through open windows. I remember thinking it looked like the kind of place people wrote love songs about. And that's when I saw him. Trent Walker, the ex, tall, smug. The same cocky smile he wore when he broke up with me 3 years ago because I was too safe. He was holding a drink and leaning against the kitchen counter like he owned the whole house. Spoiler alert, he didn't. He saw me walk in, eyes scanning me top to bottom like I was a stain. I said hi. He didn't say it back. Instead, he laughed, turned to the group, and said it. The sentence that would burn itself into the walls of my mind forever. Why don't you go back to your box, Olivia? It got quiet for half a second. Then the laughter came, sharp, cruel, echoing, like knives dressed as sound. Even Katie, the girl who invited me, covered her mouth to hide a snicker. No one defended me. No one said a word. And in that moment, I felt it. The burn of shame crawling up my spine. The heat behind my eyes. The way my fingers curled into fists inside my pockets. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at the wall behind Trent and memorized the address pinned on the fridge. 2311 Westfield Drive. I stayed for 12 more minutes, ate one cold slice of pizza, drank flat soda, then I walked out like I wasn't burning inside. But the fire had started, and I wasn't going to let it die. When I got back to the garage that night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and typed the address into a property lookup site. And there it was, a listing, for sale, owner looking to downsize. That was the moment the idea hit me like thunder. I wouldn't scream at Trent, wouldn't post about him, wouldn't even block him. I'd do something better, something unforgettable. I'd buy the house he rented, and I'd become the one person he never thought I could be, his landlord. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, not even because I was humiliated, but because for the first time in months I felt something stronger than shame. I felt purpose. I became obsessed. Every day, after my shift at the cafe ended, I'd go straight back to the garage, fire up my laptop, and study that house. 2311 Westfield Drive, the one with the sagging porch, The flaking shutters, the crooked mailbox that looked like it had been hit one too many times by drunk drivers. But I didn't see flaws. I saw opportunity. I saw a battlefield. The house was owned by a woman named Martha Caldwell, widow, no children, 83 years old. According to the real estate listing, she was looking to sell the property as is and move into a retirement home closer to her sister in San Antonio. The house had been listed for over 2 months. No offers. I couldn't believe it. This was divine timing. Destiny. Karma in brick and wood. But destiny still costs money. And I didn't have any. What I did have, though, was time and obsession. I picked up a second shift at the cafe, started babysitting for my cousin's kids at night, sold my car, my poor beat-up Civic that had been with me through 3 breakups, 2 jobs, and a cross-state move. And still, it wasn't enough. Then one night, as I was scrolling through late-night real estate forums, I found a post about local down payment assistance programs for first-time buyers. I clicked, read every word like it was scripture. There it was, Austin's first Nest program. If I could get pre-approved, attend the seminar, and meet the income bracket, I could qualify for up to $25,000 in down payment support. It felt like a key, and I was about to turn the lock. The seminar was held at a community center near East 11th. I wore my best dress, the navy one with the stitched hem, and sat in the front row, notebook in hand, while others were zoning out or checking their phones. I was writing every rule, every tip, every number. A week later, I had my pre-approval letter. I cried in the parking lot, the kind of tears that feel like prayers being answered. Then came the phone call. Martha answered on the second ring. Her voice was soft, warm, like the pages of an old library book. I introduced myself, told her I was interested in the house. She sounded surprised. "No one's called in weeks," she said. "Most young people want modern kitchens and fancy gadgets. Not this old thing." "It's perfect," I told her, and I meant it. We arranged a tour for the next afternoon. When I walked through the front door, something shifted. The scent of aged wood and faded rose potpourri hit me like memory. The floor creaked, the walls whispered, and in the back corner of the living room, I saw it. A water stain that looked like a cloud, hovering just above the baseboard. To someone else, that might be a red flag. To me, it was poetry. Martha offered me tea. We sat on the porch swing, and she told me about her husband, how he built the porch with his own hands in the 70s, how she still touched his pillow every morning. She looked tired, not sad, just ready to let go. "I want this house to go to someone who will care for it," she said. "Someone who sees more than peeling paint." "I do," I said, my voice shaking. "I see everything, and I meant it. I saw my past, my future, my fire." She took my hand, and just like that, we had a verbal agreement. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with a loan officer, submitted every document imaginable, and waited. Nights stretched like wire, days passed in caffeine-fueled blurs. But then, the email came through. Subject line, final approval notice. I sat there, staring at the screen, not breathing. My aunt came in and found me like that. She didn't say a word, just sat beside me and held my hand. Together, we read every line. I was a homeowner, me, the girl who got laughed at in a party, the one who slept next to a washer and dryer, the one who was called homeless. Now I owned 2311 Westfield Drive, the house Trent rented, the house I walked out of with a burning heart, and soon I'd walk back in with a deed in my name and a plan in my hands. But I didn't celebrate right away, because now came the real moment, the reveal. I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to be cold. I didn't want to gloat. I wanted silence to speak louder than revenge. So I went back to the listing, found the name of the current rental agency Trent used. Turns out, the owner had handed over all lease management to them, which meant, when the deed transferred to me, the rental agreement stayed in place. but with new terms, if I wanted. I scheduled a meeting with the agent, a sharp woman named Valerie, and handed her my ownership papers. She blinked when she saw my name. "You're the new owner?" "Yes." I slid the updated lease adjustment across the table. A 40% increase starting next month. Not illegal, just business. Valerie shrugged. "I'll notify the tenants." And just like that, the trap was set. I didn't text Trent, didn't post a thing. I just waited. 3 days later, he messaged me. "No hello, just did you do this?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Instead, I walked over to Westfield Drive on a bright Sunday morning with Valerie. We had scheduled a routine inspection, owner's rights. When Trent opened the door and saw me standing there in a clean blazer and ballet flats, holding a clipboard, he turned pale. "You have got to be kidding me," he mumbled. "Good morning, Trent," I said. "I'm here to inspect the property and discuss next month's rent." He looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. I walked past him. Every creak of the wood under my feet felt like a drumbeat of justice. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes. He just watched me like I was a ghost wearing a crown. When we were done, he tried to talk. "Olivia, this is crazy. You can't just raise the rent that much. I have roommates. We have a lease, and I have a deed." I replied calmly, "You called me homeless. Now I'm your landlord. We all get titles. Trent, we earn them." He didn't laugh this time. There was no crowd, no cheap beer, no music. Just me, the woman he mocked, holding the keys to the very door he slammed behind me once. And I wasn't leaving this time, because I owned the place, and him, he was just passing through. 3 days after the inspection, the formal transition began. I signed the final escrow documents, and the keys real. Physical proof were dropped into my hand by the lawyer with a smile. They felt heavier than I expected, not in weight, but in meaning. They weren't just keys to a house. They were keys to a turning point, to everything Trent thought I could never have. I didn't rush to move in. Not yet. This next step was too delicate, too strategic, because I knew Trent, knew how his pride worked, how his ego would react. If I made it personal, he'd fight. But if I made it professional, he'd have nowhere to run. So, I sent everything through the property management company, the lease adjustment, the updated contact information, the new payment portal, all signed under my LLC Ramirez Holdings. LLC, it had a nice ring to it. And best of all, it didn't scream revenge. It whispered power. Valerie, the property manager, handled everything with a smirk of admiration. She called after the updated lease letters went out. "You're stone cold," she said. "I like it." I just smiled. Because the first of the month was coming, and with it rent was due, at the new rate. Trent didn't reach out again, but I could tell. The silence was thick. He was stewing, plotting, probably telling his friends how unfair this was, but he'd have to choose pay or leave. The next time I saw him, it was completely unplanned. I had stopped by the property to meet a plumber about a leaky pipe in the upstairs bathroom. Trent was on the porch, slouched in a plastic chair, hoodie pulled up, smoking something he tried to hide when he saw me. I walked past him like a breeze. He stood up quickly. "Olivia," he said, voice tight. "We need to talk." I turned slowly. "Talk, you've made your point." "Okay." He rubbed the back of his neck, pretending to laugh. "You're the boss now. Ha. Big move, but seriously, this rent hike, we can't afford it." I tilted my head. "Then you can vacate." "Are you serious?" I didn't blink. "You called me homeless. Trent. I didn't mean you said it in front of people. Made it a joke. You said I didn't have a home. Now I have yours." His mouth opened, then closed. The kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they're no longer holding the cards. "You don't have to do this. I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm running a property. You're just a tenant." I stepped inside and left the door open, letting my footsteps echo down the hallway that used to laugh at me. Now it answered to me. Upstairs, the plumber gave me an estimate. The repairs weren't cheap, but I told him to proceed. I wasn't just collecting rent. I was investing in the home, in myself. By the time I left, Trent was gone. His roommates watched me from the living room couch like I was an alien species. Not angry, just stunned. The girl they thought would fade away had walked back in wearing the crown. A week later, the rent hit my account. On time. All of it. No excuses. No discounts. I looked at the transfer and almost laughed. It felt unreal. 3 months ago, I was counting quarters in a grocery store parking lot. Now Trent's money was paying my mortgage. My aunt cried when I told her. We toasted with cheap champagne and pizza, and I gave her a set of keys. It's yours, too. I said, you gave me a roof when I had nothing. Now let me give you something back. She moved into the front bedroom 2 weeks later, planted rosemary and basil in the garden, hung wind chimes on the porch. It wasn't just a revenge story anymore. It was a new chapter, one we were building together. Still, there was one more thing I had to do. I walked into a local print shop and ordered a plaque. Brushed bronze. Simple lettering. It read, 2311 Westfield Drive, property of O.R. I hung it just under the mailbox. The same one I had stared at that night after Trent's party. The same one that had once felt like a wall. Now it was mine. And Trent, he started avoiding the house, spending more nights out, missing rent deadlines, blaming cash flow. I stayed patient, professional, cold, even. Eventually, I knew he'd break. The ego that laughed at me would buckle under the weight of pride and overdue notices. And when that moment came, I'd be ready. Not to punish, but to close the book. On a chapter that no longer controlled me. The eviction notices weren't personal. They were procedural. Trent had missed 2 rent deadlines. The property manager filed the standard paperwork. But when the certified letter showed up in the mailbox, I could feel his panic from 3 houses away. He came storming up the steps one night just past 10 p.m. I was on the porch, sipping tea. Calm, silent. Watching the wind sway the chimes my aunt had hung. Are you seriously kicking me out? He asked. I looked up. No anger, no reaction, just one long breath. I gave you options. You chose to ignore them. This is insane. You're following the law. I finished. That's right. He sat on the edge of the porch, head in his hands. It wasn't rage anymore. It was defeat. You always wanted to be better than me, he said quietly. No, I said. I wanted to be better for me. And that was the truth. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about healing. About proving to myself that I was never the girl he called a burden. Never the girl too fragile to rise. I was iron. I was thunder wrapped in silk. 2 weeks later, he moved out, left the place a mess. Beer cans, a broken lamp, a stack of unpaid utility bills. But I didn't flinch. I walked through that mess like a queen surveying her castle after a storm, and I cleaned it myself. Every wall, every carpet stain, every window he left smudged with ego. I painted the room he used to sleep in a soft, pale blue, hung curtains that let the morning light flood in, turned it into a guest room, a space of peace, a space where no insults lived. By spring, the whole house bloomed. My aunt hosted brunch on Sundays. Neighbors waved and complimented the fresh paint. Kids from the neighborhood played in the yard. No one knew the war this house once held. Only I did, and I carried it like a quiet flame never to burn, just to remember. Because some victories don't come with applause. They come with silence, and a locked door you now own the key to. I didn't expect the silence after Trent left to feel so loud. For weeks. Every time I stepped into that hallway. I half expected him to be there, slouched on the couch, mumbling a complaint, leaving muddy footprints by the back door. But the house was still, and in that stillness came clarity. I wasn't just the owner of a property anymore. I was a woman who had turned humiliation into equity. I had turned a slur into a strategy. And now, Now it was time to shape the future I truly wanted. But fate, it wasn't finished with me, because 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail, folded neatly, handwritten return address, from Trent's mother. It read, "Dear Olivia, I heard what happened. I'm sorry for my son's behavior. He was raised better. I hope you can forgive him. I also wanted to ask if the room is vacant. Would you consider renting it to someone else in our family?" I read that letter 3 times, each time slower, not out of anger, but out of awe. They truly had no shame. I didn't reply. Some answers are best written in action. So instead, I reached out to a women's shelter I'd volunteered at years ago, asked if they had a resident transitioning out who needed temporary housing. 3 weeks later, the guest room belonged to Danielle, a 27-year-old single mom with a 2-year-old daughter named Maya. The moment they stepped into the house, something shifted again. It felt right, like the energy was being scrubbed clean, like I was planting peace where bitterness once stood. Danielle cooked dinner twice a week. Maya loved dancing barefoot on the wood floors. The house, once stiff with ego, began to feel soft, warm, alive. Of course, Trent wasn't done trying. He showed up again this time, in a suit, looking polished, controlled. He claimed he wanted to buy the house, said he had a partner, investment interest, big ideas. "It's a good deal," he said. "And I know the place. I know its quirks." I didn't laugh, didn't smirk. I just said, "This house isn't for sale." He smiled like he expected that. "Everyone has a price. Not this time," I replied. He leaned in. "You can't hold a grudge forever. Olivia, I'm not holding a grudge," I said, voice cool as marble. "I'm holding the deed." That was the last time I saw him. But I heard about him later from a friend of a friend. His new partner bailed, his startup crashed, and rumor had it, he was sleeping on his brother's couch. Poetic. As for me, I started hosting writing workshops in the sunroom, inviting women from the shelter, from the community. We wrote letters we never sent, stories we never thought we were allowed to tell. The house became a sanctuary, not just for revenge, but for resurrection. I repainted the front door bright yellow, put a welcome sign on the porch, and one small plaque inside the entryway. It read, "This house once tried to break me. Now it holds me, and those I choose to hold." I think sometimes people assume revenge is loud. Screaming, destruction, a final slap. But real revenge, true, soul-satisfying vengeance. It's quiet. It's calm. It looks like you living a beautiful life in a place they thought you'd never touch. And it smells like pancakes on a Sunday. Sounds like laughter in the hallway. Feels like sunlight pouring into a room they swore you didn't belong in. One night, Danielle asked me why I did it, why I bought the house, why I didn't just walk away. I looked at her, at Maya twirling in her dinosaur pajamas, at the rosemary blooming on the porch, and I said, because I was tired of asking for space, I decided to own it instead. And I did, I still do, every single day. I didn't need to tell people about what happened. The house told the story for me. Every corner of it held memory. Every room had changed, not just in color or furniture or smell, but in energy. It no longer belonged to the boy who mocked. It belonged to the woman who built. I started keeping a journal, not just about the house, but about everything it taught me. How sometimes the worst insult becomes the blueprint for your greatest comeback. How a garage can feel more honest than a mansion. How silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's power. I found an old photo in one of the drawers left behind. Martha and her husband smiling on this same porch 50 years ago. I framed it, placed it above the mantel. They were the first owners of this house, and I wanted to honor that. The love they had, the years they lived, before it became a battleground, before it became mine. Danielle helped me start a community pantry by the driveway. We filled it with canned food, diapers, soap, Neighbors began adding things too. At first it was small, but one day I saw a man leave a sealed bag of groceries with a note. For the strong woman who turned a house into hope. I didn't know who he was, but I smiled all the same. Sometimes people walk past the house slowly, looking at it like it's familiar, like they remember something they can't name. And I wonder if one of them is from that party that night. I wonder if they remember the girl in the corner, holding a slice of pizza, swallowing tears and rage. If they do, I hope they see the garden now, the mailbox shining, the yellow door wide open. And I hope they know that girl didn't disappear. She just evolved. And when Trent's name comes up now, and it does, sometimes I just smile. Because I don't need to defend my choices. My life does that for me. The rent payments I no longer rely on. The guest room I now use for visiting authors. The little plaque by the mailbox that says peace lives here. Sometimes I light a candle and sit on the porch alone. No phone, no music. Just the sound of the wind, the breath of a house that once mocked me, now exhaling calm. And I think maybe this is the best kind of revenge. Not breaking what hurt you, but rebuilding something better, on top of the ashes they left behind. One Saturday, a young woman came to the house. She was holding a notebook. Said she'd heard about my writing group from the library bulletin board. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. I welcomed her in, made tea, gave her a seat in the sunroom. She barely spoke the first session, but I saw it in her eyes, the weight she carried, the need to release it through words. By the third meeting, she read a piece aloud. It was about being underestimated, laughed at, made to feel invisible, and how one day she wouldn't just be seen, she'd be impossible to ignore. I clapped the loudest, because I knew that story, I'd lived it, and now I was watching someone else rise, too. This house, that it didn't just hold revenge anymore. It held rebirth, a quiet revolution in every brick, not loud, not cruel, just powerful. And me, I was no longer the girl trying to prove herself. I had already proven everything I needed. To the world. To Trent. But most of all, to myself. The house he mocked me in, it stands taller now. Not because I changed its foundation, but because I changed mine. I wake up every morning to light pouring through the windows. The same windows that once framed a version of me I didn't recognize as shamed. Small. Erased. Now. I pour coffee into a mug that says, Owner. And I walk barefoot across hardwood floors that echo power, not apology. My aunt hums in the kitchen. Maya's giggles bounce down the hall. Danielle folds laundry while singing Whitney Houston under her breath. This house isn't silent anymore. It breathes. It holds joy. Every inch of this place has been rewritten, reclaimed. Even the front steps where I once stood frozen under Trent's insult now carry potted herbs, worn welcome mats, and the sound of laughter on Sunday mornings. There was a time I thought justice meant watching him fall. But real justice. It's watching myself rise. They say closure comes from forgiveness. But for me, it came from foundation, from contracts, from deeds. From the soft click of the door that only opens with my key, I built something here. Not to prove Trent wrong, but to prove myself right. I was never too soft, never too quiet, never too weak. I was just gathering the tools. And now I build legacies. One morning, months after he moved out, I found a note slipped under the door. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. It read, I didn't mean it. I was young, stupid. I see now. You were always more than I could handle. I'm sorry. I folded the note carefully, placed it in a drawer I rarely open. Not because I needed the apology, but because it reminded me some people grow, some people stay stuck, and some people rebuild. Quietly brick by brick, until the world can't ignore their presence anymore. I never replied. That silence was its own kind of answer. Because I didn't need closure. I had a mortgage. I had tenants. I had Sunday brunch. I had peace. And peace doesn't scream, it just shows up and stays. The house hosted a poetry night recently. Women from the neighborhood filled the living room. We lit candles, read verses, shared wine. No one talked about who used to live here, only about who they had become, who they were becoming. After everyone left, I stood by the window and looked out over the lawn. The moonlight made the porch glow, and I whispered, "Thank you." To the house, to the pain, to the fire that forged me. People often think revenge is about getting back at someone. But what they miss is this revenge isn't about them. It's about reclaiming the space they convinced you you'd never deserve. And I've reclaimed every inch. From the tiles in the bathroom to the attic, I turned into a meditation loft. From the basement, I remodeled into a storage room for donated supplies, to the front porch where I now sip wine, not swallow humiliation. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone to that party. If I hadn't heard those words. Why don't you go back to your box? But I stop myself, because some wounds are maps. They lead us back to our true selves. And that party, that moment of cruelty, it lit the fuse. It woke the builder inside me, the landlord, the fighter, the owner. Now, when I open my door, I don't see ghosts. I see garden beds. I see growth. And when someone asks how I did it, I tell them the truth. One silent decision at a time, one paper, one form, one saved dollar, until I didn't just own a home, I owned my story. And if Trent ever drives by, if he ever slows his car to stare at the porch he once stood on like a king, I hope he sees the flowers, the plaque, the light, and I hope he knows I'm not mad. I'm just finished. The next spring, I opened the house for something new, an annual open garden day. It started small, a few curious neighbors, a couple of school kids with their moms. But the news spread. By the third year, it was a neighborhood event. People brought cuttings from their own plants to share. There was music, lemonade, chalk drawings on the sidewalk, and people started asking who owns this place, who started this. And someone would point toward me, standing by the roses, hands in dirt, just a girl who once got called homeless, now a woman whose soil grows community. I started mentoring teens, helping them build credit, teaching them how to read a lease, how to ask questions, how to hold the pen when they sign their name to something permanent. I taught them what no one taught me, not out of bitterness, but because I believe the best revenge is to open doors, especially the ones that were slammed in your face. And when people ask about Trent now, they always expect a dramatic tale, some scene of him begging for something he can't have. But there is no scene, there is no finale. He faded, like a bad smell in a room that's been aired out long enough. The revenge wasn't just in the mortgage or the lease. It was in the way I no longer thought of him, in the way my heart no longer raced when I passed old places, in the way my voice became steadier, softer, but never weaker. This house taught me how to carry pain and still plant things that bloom. How to walk into a space that once rejected me and transform it with presence. Not noise, not fire, just undeniable presence. And maybe, just maybe somewhere out there, another Olivia is being laughed at, told she doesn't belong. And I hope she finds this story, not to relive the pain, but to know it can be the first page of something extraordinary. Because the house he mocked me in, it's mine now. But more importantly, I am mine now. Completely. Finally. Forever. I stood on the porch one last evening before the season changed. Hands tucked into my sleeves, watching the light flicker in the windows. It was quiet but not empty. It was full of the lives lived here. Of laughter healed. Of strength found in unexpected corners. Of mornings when I woke up not feeling afraid anymore. Somewhere in a box upstairs is that old invitation from the party. The one where it all started. I kept it. Not for nostalgia. But as a reminder, even the cruelest moments can mark the beginning of something beautiful. Even the most painful insults can become the bricks beneath your feet. This story. It doesn't end with revenge, it ends with ownership. Not just of a house, but of voice, of dignity, of legacy. He called me homeless. So I built a home no one could take from me. And in doing so, I found the one thing stronger than revenge, peace that lasts.